The wooden table shattered against the concrete sidewalk with a sound like breaking bones. 8-year-old Maya Williams watched in stunned silence as yellow liquid splashed across her sneakers, mixing with the tears that had been falling for the past 10 minutes. The handcuffs clicked around her father's wrists with mechanical precision, while her mother's voice rose in desperate protest from the back of the second patrol car. "She's just a baby. She was just trying to help with school supplies." But the officers weren't listening anymore. They had heard what they needed to hear. 3 hours earlier, Maya had been the happiest girl on Elmwood Avenue. She had convinced her parents to let her set up a lemonade stand on their small front lawn, a card table decorated with hand-drawn signs that read, "Maya's Super Lemonade, 50 cents," in purple crayon. The idea had come to her during breakfast when her mother, Patricia, mentioned they were still $20 short for Maya's school supply list. "I can help, Mama," Maya had said, bouncing in her chair. "I can make money like the kids on TV." David Williams had smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm, though the worry lines around his eyes never quite disappeared these days. Working double shifts at the warehouse barely covered rent and groceries, let alone the seemingly endless list of supplies Maya needed for 3rd grade. But seeing his daughter's bright face, he couldn't say no. "All right, baby girl, let's make some lemonade." They had spent the morning squeezing fresh lemons, adding just the right amount of sugar, and painting a bright yellow poster that Maya insisted would make people super thirsty. The first customers had been neighborhood kids riding their bikes, each gladly parting with quarters and dimes for Maya's cheerful service. She had practiced her sales pitch in the mirror that morning. "Would you like some lemonade? It's made with real lemons and love." By noon, she had earned $3.47, carefully counted and recounted in the mason jar that served as her register. Her parents took turns watching from the front steps, Patricia occasionally bringing out more cups or ice, David helping Maya make change when the math got tricky. That's when Linda Morrison appeared at the edge of their property line. Maya had seen the woman before, always walking her perfectly groomed poodle and scowling at anyone who dared to let their grass grow a day too long. Mrs. Morrison was the kind of woman who measured her neighbors' hedge heights and left anonymous notes about property values and neighborhood standards. She wore her authority as head of the Homeowners Association like armor, and she wielded it with the precision of a sword. "Excuse me," Linda called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She stood with her hands planted firmly on her hips, her thin lips pressed into a disapproving line. "Is there a permit for this commercial enterprise?" Maya looked up from counting her money, confused by the big words. Patricia stepped forward, her protective instincts already alert to the hostile tone. "It's just a lemonade stand, Mrs. Morrison. Maya's trying to earn some money for school supplies." "I don't care what she's trying to do," Linda snapped, her voice rising with each word. "This is a residential neighborhood, not a business district. There are rules about this sort of thing. Health codes, zoning laws. You people can't just set up shop wherever you please." The words, "you people," hung in the air like a slap, and Patricia felt her chest tighten with familiar dread. She had heard that tone before, in grocery store checkout lines and parent-teacher conferences. In every space where her family's right to exist was somehow always in question. "Mrs. Morrison, she's 8 years old," David said, walking over to stand beside his wife. "She's just trying to help her family. Surely there's no harm in, don't tell me what's harmful and what isn't." Linda interrupted, her face flushing red. "I've been living in this neighborhood for 15 years, and I know the rules. This is illegal commercial activity on residential property, and I won't stand for it. If you don't shut this down immediately, I'm calling the police." Maya looked from her parents to the angry woman and back again, not understanding why anyone would be upset about lemonade. She had been so careful to make it just right, adding extra ice and even drawing smiley faces on the cups with a marker. "Did I do something wrong? Daddy?" she whispered, her lower lip beginning to tremble. David knelt down beside her, his heart breaking at the confusion in his daughter's eyes. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong at all." But Linda Morrison was already dialing 911 on her phone, speaking in the clipped, authoritative tone she reserved for emergencies. "Yes, I need to report an illegal business operation in a residential zone. There's a family running an unlicensed food service establishment at 1247 Elmwood Avenue. Yes. I'll hold." She looked directly at Maya as she spoke, as if the 8-year-old were some kind of criminal mastermind running a sophisticated operation instead of a little girl with a folding table and a pitcher of lemonade. The police arrived within 12 minutes. 2 squad cars pulling up to the curb with their lights flashing, but no sirens. Officer James Rodriguez stepped out of the first car, already regretting whatever call had brought him to this quiet residential street on a Saturday afternoon. His partner, Officer Sarah Chen, emerged from the second vehicle, both of them surveying the scene with growing confusion. A little girl stood behind a small table covered with plastic cups and a pitcher, while 3 adults faced off on the sidewalk like combatants preparing for war. "Someone called about an illegal business," Rodriguez asked, glancing between Linda's furious expression and the Williams family's obvious distress. Linda immediately launched into her complaint, gesturing dramatically at Maya's modest setup. "This is clearly a commercial enterprise operating without proper permits or health department approval. They're selling food products to the public without any oversight or regulation. This is exactly the kind of activity that brings down property values and attracts undesirable elements to the neighborhood." Officer Chen walked over to examine the lemonade stand more closely, noting the hand-drawn signs and the mason jar with a few crumpled dollar bills and some loose change. Maya watched the uniformed woman approach, her earlier excitement now completely replaced by fear. "Hi there, sweetheart," Chen said gently. "This is a very nice lemonade stand you have here. Did you make this lemonade yourself?" Maya nodded mutely, suddenly too scared to speak. The police cars had drawn attention from neighbors, and she could see people coming out of their houses to stare. "The law is the law," Linda continued, her voice growing shriller with each word. "If we start making exceptions for every sob story, where does it end? Today it's lemonade. Tomorrow it could be anything. These people need to learn that there are proper channels for this sort of thing. Permits, inspections, business licenses. You can't just decide to start selling things because you feel like it." Her words dripped with contempt, and Patricia felt her hands clench into fists at her sides. Officer Rodriguez found himself in an impossible situation. Technically, Linda Morrison was correct about the regulations, though he had never in his 12-year career been called to shut down a child's lemonade stand. The letter of the law was clear, but the spirit of it seemed to have been lost somewhere between the rule book and this suburban sidewalk. "Ma'am," he said to Patricia, "I understand you're trying to help your daughter, but there are regulations about selling food products, even in residential areas." "Are you seriously going to arrest an 8-year-old for selling lemonade?" David asked, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. He had spent his entire life being careful around police officers, teaching his daughter to say "yes, sir," and "no, sir," and to never make sudden movements. But watching his child's dreams crumble over a few cups of lemonade was testing every ounce of restraint he possessed. "This is insane. She's a little girl trying to buy school supplies, not Pablo Escobar running a drug cartel." The situation escalated quickly after that. Linda Morrison, emboldened by the officer's presence, demanded immediate action. I want them cited for operating without a permit, violating health codes, and conducting illegal commercial activity. This is exactly why we have these laws. And they need to be enforced equally for everyone." The emphasis she placed on the word everyone made her meaning crystal clear, and Officer Rodriguez felt his stomach turn at the implications. When David stepped forward to object, demanding to know why his daughter was being treated like a criminal, the situation spiraled beyond anyone's control. The officers, following protocol for what they perceived as an escalating confrontation, made the decision that would haunt them for months to come. "Sir, I need you to step back and calm down," Rodriguez commanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt. "We're just doing our job here." "Your job," Patricia's voice cracked with emotion. "Your job is to protect children, not terrorize them over lemonade." But her protest was cut short as Officer Chen moved to restrain her, citing obstruction of justice when she tried to shield Maya from the chaos unfolding around them. The handcuffs were cold against Patricia's wrists as she was placed in the back of one patrol car, her frantic eyes locked on her daughter's terrified face. David's arrest followed moments later, despite his attempts to remain calm and cooperative. The officers claimed he was being aggressive and non-compliant, though several neighbors who witnessed the incident would later testify that he never raised his voice or made any threatening gestures. Maya watched in horror as both her parents were taken away, their shouted reassurances that everything would be okay sounding hollow in the face of flashing lights and gathering crowds. In the chaos of the arrests, Officer Rodriguez knocked over Maya's lemonade stand, sending the pitcher crashing to the ground and scattering cups across the sidewalk. The card table collapsed under the impact, its wooden legs splitting with sharp cracks that echoed in Maya's memory long after the police cars had driven away. Her precious earnings, $3.47 that represented hours of hope and hard work, were confiscated as evidence of illegal commercial activity. Linda Morrison watched the scene unfold with grim satisfaction, convinced she had struck a blow for law and order in her perfect neighborhood. She collected her poodle's leash and prepared to return to her immaculate house, already composing the email she would send to the Homeowners Association about the incident. In her mind, she had done exactly what any responsible citizen would do when faced with such blatant disregard for community standards. But Linda had not counted on Maria Santos, the grandmother who lived 3 houses down and had been tending her garden when the police arrived. Maria had watched the entire confrontation from behind her rose bushes, her phone recording every moment from the first harsh words to Maya's heartbroken sobs. As a retired teacher who had spent 40 years working with children, Maria recognized injustice when she saw it, and she was not about to let it pass unchallenged. Within an hour of the police car's departure, Maria's video was uploaded to Facebook with a caption that would change everything. "This is what happened to 8-year-old Maya Williams today, when she tried to sell lemonade to buy school supplies. Watch how our community treats its children. Then decide if this is who we want to be." The post was shared 17 times in the first 10 minutes, each share carrying Maria's outrage to a wider circle of friends and neighbors who couldn't believe what they were seeing. Meanwhile, Maya sat alone on her front steps, surrounded by the wreckage of her broken dreams. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the commotion and staying out of concern for the traumatized child. Mrs. Henderson from across the street brought a box of tissues and sat quietly beside Maya, offering silent comfort. Mr. Jackson, who ran the corner barbershop, knelt down and helped Maya collect the scattered cups and broken pieces of her sign. "My mama and daddy got arrested," Maya whispered to Mrs. Henderson, her voice small and broken. "I just wanted to help buy my school supplies. I didn't know I was being bad." The words cut through the gathered neighbors like knives. Each adult present suddenly confronted with the reality of what they had just witnessed. This wasn't about permits or regulations or property values. This was about a little girl whose only crime was trying to help her family. The video began to spread like wildfire across social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Within 3 hours, Maya's story had reached thousands of people, each viewing triggering a cascade of shares, comments, and outraged responses. The footage was damning in its clarity: a small black child being terrorized by police over a lemonade stand while a white woman stood by, demanding justice for what she clearly considered a serious crime. Local news stations picked up the story by evening, their reporters scrambling to interview witnesses and community leaders. Channel 7's Sarah Mitchell arrived on Elmwood Avenue just as the sun was setting, finding Maya still on her front steps, now surrounded by dozens of neighbors who had formed an impromptu support circle. "This is unconscionable," said Reverend Thomas from Mount Olive Baptist Church, who had rushed over as soon as he heard what happened. "We're talking about a child, an 8-year-old child, being treated like a criminal for trying to help her family." The interview footage was devastating. Maya, still wearing her lemonade-stained dress, looked directly into the camera and said, "I just wanted to buy my school supplies. I don't understand why the police took my mommy and daddy away. Did I do something really, really bad?" Her innocence and confusion struck viewers like a physical blow, generating thousands of comments and shares within minutes of the broadcast. By midnight, Maya's story had gone national. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and every major news outlet picked up the video, each adding their own commentary and analysis. Legal experts weighed in on the appropriateness of the police response. Child psychologists discussed the trauma of seeing parents arrested. Civil rights leaders connected Maya's experience to broader patterns of discrimination and over-policing in communities of color. The public response was swift and overwhelming. A GoFundMe account set up by Maria Santos to help the Williams family with legal fees and Maya's school supplies raised over $50,000 in the first 24 hours. Messages of support poured in from across the country, many including donations and offers of help. Parents shared their own stories of children's lemonade stands, creating a massive contrast between Maya's treatment and the encouragement most children receive for such entrepreneurial efforts. David and Patricia Williams were released from jail Sunday morning, charges still pending, but bail posted by an anonymous donor who had seen the news coverage. They returned home to find their street transformed. Dozens of supporters had gathered on their lawn, holding signs reading "Justice for Maya" and "Lemonade is not a crime." Their mailbox overflowed with letters of support, gift cards, and checks from strangers moved by their daughter's story. But the real shock came when they learned about the GoFundMe account. Over $100,000 had been donated in less than 48 hours, with contributions still pouring in from around the world. Messages accompanying the donations told stories of childhood lemonade stands, memories of parental sacrifice, and outrage at the injustice their family had suffered. "Every child deserves to dream," wrote one donor from California. "Maya's courage inspires us all," added another from New York. Linda Morrison, meanwhile, had become the most hated woman in America. Her personal information had been leaked online within hours of Maria's video going viral, and her phone hadn't stopped ringing with angry calls and death threats. Her employer, a prestigious real estate firm, distanced themselves from her actions with a carefully worded statement about not tolerating discrimination. The Homeowners Association she had led for 15 years called an emergency meeting to discuss her removal from leadership. The media attention was relentless and unforgiving. Reporters camped outside Linda's house. Neighbors avoided her at the grocery store, and her own children faced harassment at their private schools. What she had seen as righteous enforcement of community standards was now being dissected on national television as a textbook example of racial bias and abuse of authority. Legal experts discussed potential civil rights violations, while child advocates demanded accountability for the trauma inflicted on Maya. The police department found itself under intense scrutiny as well. Internal Affairs launched an immediate investigation into the arrests, while the police chief held a press conference to address the public outrage, while our officers followed proper protocol based on the complaint they received. Chief Martinez explained, "We recognize that the situation could have been handled with more discretion and sensitivity, particularly given the age of the child involved. But the damage was already done." Body camera footage from the arrests, released under public pressure, showed Officer Rodriguez and Officer Chen treating David and Patricia Williams with unnecessary aggression, while Linda Morrison coached them from the sidelines. The contrast between their approach to the black family and their deference to the white woman's demands was impossible to ignore, sparking renewed discussions about racial bias in policing. The breaking point came Thursday evening during the emergency meeting of the Elmwood Neighborhood Association. The community center was packed beyond capacity, with over 300 residents demanding answers and accountability. David and Patricia Williams sat in the front row with Maya between them, the little girl clutching a stuffed animal donated by one of her many new supporters. The room buzzed with tension as neighbors who had lived side by side for years found themselves on opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide. Linda Morrison entered the meeting to a chorus of boos and angry shouts. She had prepared a statement defending her actions, insisting that rules applied equally to everyone, regardless of race or age. But her words were drowned out by the crowd's reaction. Neighbors standing to share their own stories of Linda's harassment and discrimination over the years. "She called the city on my wind chimes," testified Mrs. Patterson. "She reported my son for skateboarding on the sidewalk," added Mr. Garcia. This wasn't about permits. This was about power and control. The meeting's most powerful moment came when Maya herself asked to speak. The room fell silent as the 8-year-old walked to the microphone, helped by her father to adjust the height. "I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped my family," she began, her voice clear and strong despite her nervousness. "I learned that when bad things happen, good people can make them better. I want to set up my lemonade stand again. But this time, I want to give the money to other kids who need school supplies too." The emotional impact of Maya's words was immediate and profound. Adults wept openly as the child who had been terrorized just days earlier spoke about forgiveness and helping others. Her resilience and grace in the face of injustice shamed every person in that room who had remained silent while discrimination flourished in their community. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes, with chants of "Maya, Maya, Maya" echoing throughout the building. The vote to remove Linda Morrison from all positions within the Homeowners Association was unanimous. Additional measures were passed that night, including a formal apology to the Williams family, a commitment to anti-discrimination training for community leaders, and the establishment of a fund to support children's educational and entrepreneurial activities. Linda Morrison left the meeting in disgrace, her 15-year reign of neighborhood tyranny finally brought to an end. The legal consequences followed quickly. The district attorney announced that all charges against David and Patricia Williams would be dropped immediately, acknowledging that the arrests were unjustified and that no crime had been committed. The city settled the civil rights lawsuit filed on behalf of the family for an undisclosed sum, though sources suggested it was substantial enough to secure Maya's education through college. Officers Rodriguez and Chen faced departmental discipline for their handling of the situation, though they kept their jobs after completing mandatory bias training and community service. The police department implemented new policies requiring supervisor approval before arresting anyone under 18 for nonviolent offenses, and established a community liaison program to improve relationships with minority neighborhoods. 3 months later, Maya Williams set up her lemonade stand again, this time with the full support and celebration of her community. The mayor attended the grand reopening, as did reporters from national media outlets documenting the positive aftermath of the incident. Maya had learned to make several flavors of lemonade, and her earnings from the first day alone exceeded her original goal of $20 by a factor of 50. True to her promise, Maya donated all proceeds to the Maya's School Supplies Fund, a scholarship program established to help children from low-income families purchase educational materials. The fund, supported by ongoing donations from around the world, had already helped over 200 children in the district. Maya personally delivered supply packages to recipients, her smile bright with the knowledge that something good had come from something terrible. Linda Morrison eventually left the neighborhood. Her house sold quietly to a young family with 2 small children, who immediately set up a play area in their front yard. The new neighbors were welcomed warmly by a community that had learned valuable lessons about inclusion, empathy, and standing up for what's right. Maya often stopped by their house on her way to school, sometimes sharing lemonade with the children who played where Linda's perfectly manicured lawn used to enforce its silent message of exclusion. The story of Maya Williams and her lemonade stand became a symbol of resilience and community solidarity in the face of injustice. Schools across the country used her experience to teach lessons about civil rights, entrepreneurship, and the power of standing up for others. Maya herself became a sought-after speaker, despite her young age, sharing her message of forgiveness and positive action at community events and youth conferences. But perhaps the most important legacy of that terrible Saturday afternoon was the change it brought to Elmwood Avenue itself. Neighbors who had barely spoken to each other before the incident now organized block parties and community gardens. Children of all backgrounds played together in yards that had once been divided by invisible barriers of suspicion and prejudice. The street became a model for inclusive community living, visited by social workers and urban planners studying how tragedy could be transformed into triumph. On warm summer evenings, Maya could often be found on her front steps with a new pitcher of lemonade, no longer selling, but sharing freely with anyone who passed by. Her parents watched from the porch, their hearts still bearing the scars of that traumatic day, but their spirits lifted by their daughter's unshakable faith in human goodness. The broken table had been replaced with a sturdy new stand donated by the community, painted bright yellow with purple trim, and a sign that read, "Maya's Lemonade, free for friends." Sometimes, Maya would look up from her cups and remember that day when everything changed, when her simple dream of helping buy school supplies collided with hatred and fear. But those memories no longer brought only sadness. They reminded her of the power of truth, the strength that comes from community support, and the way that love can triumph over prejudice when people choose to stand together rather than remain silent in the face of injustice. As the sun set over Elmwood Avenue, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Maya Williams smiled at the sound of children laughing in neighboring yards. Her lemonade stand had become more than just a table and some cups. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the smallest voices can speak truth to power, and that communities have the ability to heal themselves when they choose courage over comfort, inclusion over exclusion, and love over fear.